I raised my daughter to be kind, respectful, and never ashamed of her family. So when her fiance leaned over at dinner and calmly informed me that his parents didn't want me at their wedding, but I was welcome to stream it online, I simply smiled and folded my napkin. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I just watched my daughter's eyes darken with shock. Then she stood up, voice shaking with anger, and told him he could find a new wife and a new job. The room froze. His parents had no idea what she had discovered or what she was about to expose. My name is Martha Keaton, and I am 68 years old. I was genuinely happy to be invited to dinner with my daughter and her fiance's family. It felt like a small celebration before the wedding, a chance to get to know the people who would soon become part of her life. I wore my best dress, brought homemade dessert, and arrived early so no one would feel awkward. The restaurant was elegant, almost intimidating, but I kept reminding myself that love, not money, should define a family. I had no idea that by the end of the evening, my place in their world would be questioned so brutally, or that my daughter would refuse to let it happen. Dinner began politely, careful smiles, practiced compliments, the kind of conversation where everyone is aware of every word. Then, without warning, her fiancé leaned toward her and lightly tapped her shoulder, as if delivering casual news. He said his parents preferred that she not attend the wedding, but she could stream it online if she wished. The words floated across the table so calmly that for a moment, no one reacted. Then the meaning settled in. She felt the sting, not because of the exclusion alone, but because he seemed to think it was perfectly reasonable, as if dignity were optional. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply folded her napkin and placed it gently beside her plate, forcing a smile to soften the silence. Years had taught her that anger rarely changes the hearts that choose disrespect. So she stayed composed, even as embarrassment pressed against her chest. She thanked them for the information, as though being disinvited from her own daughter's wedding were a scheduling note instead of a wound. Inside, though, she wondered what she had done so wrong to deserve such treatment, and why kindness always seemed to be mistaken for weakness. Her daughter's chair scraped sharply against the floor as she stood up, shock flashing into anger before anyone could soften the moment. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with fury, as she asked how anyone could dismiss her mother like an unwanted guest. The fiancé tried to hush her, insisting it was just easier this way. Easier for whom, she demanded. She reminded him of everything: sacrifices, love, support, all the things money could never replace. The restaurant fell silent as eyes turned toward their table, but she no longer cared. Respect, she knew, was not negotiable. He looked stunned, as if he'd expected agreement or at least quiet acceptance. Instead, he found himself facing a woman unwilling to trade loyalty for a wedding venue. He tried to laugh it off, saying his parents felt uncomfortable, but that only fueled the fire. His confidence cracked as he realized the decision wasn't going to pass unnoticed. For the first time, he saw that choices have consequences, especially when they involve belittling the person who had given his future wife everything she could. The atmosphere thickened. His parents shifted uncomfortably, whispering explanations that sounded more like excuses. She remained silent, hands folded, letting her daughter speak a truth she herself had swallowed for years: that love doesn't require approval, but respect does. The waiter hovered awkwardly nearby, unsure whether to clear plates or flee. Every second felt stretched, brittle, ready to snap. Yet beneath the tension grew something unexpected, a powerful sense of loyalty rising where humiliation had tried to settle. Then her daughter said something that changed everything. With steady resolve, she mentioned she knew far more about his family's expectations, their opinions, their conditions, their belief that marriage was a transaction rather than a partnership. She hinted that their control reached far beyond a wedding guest list. The room went quiet again, but this time for a different reason. There was a reckoning coming, one no one at the table had prepared for, and it all began with a single, simple refusal to accept disrespect. Later that night, her daughter sat on the edge of the bed and showed her a series of screenshots she'd saved. Messages from his parents, polite on the surface but laced with rules. What to wear, what to say, who to invite. And finally, the line that shattered everything: "We'd prefer your mother not attend. She doesn't fit our image." Her daughter's voice shook as she admitted she'd been pressured for months to distance herself. Seeing it in black and white removed any doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a quiet campaign to erase her. And that, more than anything, woke something fierce and protective in her daughter's heart. The more they talked, the clearer the picture became. His parents viewed marriage like a business merger: their way, their rules, their standards. They spoke often about upgrading social circles and presenting the right family. In their world, humility looked like insufficiency. Kindness looked like weakness. They didn't want complicated emotions, especially not a soft-spoken mother who'd built her life on hard work instead of grand appearances. The expectation was simple: accept their terms or risk losing everything they offered. But love wrapped in conditions is just controlled with prettier language, and her daughter was finally seeing it. Her daughter began connecting the dots, the subtle isolation, the suggestions that sounded more like commands, the way decisions were made for her and presented as favors. Even work opportunities had been arranged through his family, tying her future quietly to their approval. The wedding was just the latest test. If she agreed to exclude her own mother, what wouldn't she agree to later? Realization brought both anger and clarity. This wasn't about a guest list, it was about ownership. And suddenly, the glittering wedding didn't look like a dream anymore. It looked like a very beautiful cage. Instead of reacting blindly, she began quietly gathering information, emails, contracts, financial arrangements that seemed suspiciously tangled with his parents' business. She spoke with friends who had stepped back from the relationship, only now understanding why. Patterns emerged, charm at first, then pressure, then consequences when boundaries were suggested. The more she uncovered, the less she recognized the life she'd been drifting into. She realized she had been slowly shaped into someone who didn't ask questions. But that time was over. Truth had arrived, and it wasn't leaving. When she finally confronted him, her voice was steady. She laid the phone on the table and asked him to explain, one message at a time. He tried to laugh it off as cultural expectations, then shifted to guilt, claiming she was overreacting and embarrassing him. But excuses can't survive in the face of hard truth. She asked just one final question. If they can erase my mother, how long before they erase me too? He didn't answer. And that silence told her everything she needed to know. Over the next few days, more secrets slipped out. The wedding had been planned less around love and more around optics, sponsors, business deals, strategic seating. Even her job security had strings attached to his parents' influence. She felt betrayed not just by him, but by the fantasy she'd been sold. Yet beneath the pain was strength. She refused to blame herself for trusting. Trust is a virtue, not a flaw. What mattered now was what she chose next, and she was done choosing silence. She returned home late one evening, sat beside her mother, and took her hand. No anger, no panic, just a calm determination that spoke louder than any argument. She confessed she could not marry someone who saw her mother as an inconvenience instead of a blessing. A wedding without respect, she said, wasn't a wedding, it was a performance. The decision wasn't fully spoken yet, but it was already alive in her heart. And once respect wakes up inside a person, it rarely goes back to sleep. The next morning, she invited him and his parents to meet, not at a restaurant, but at her small living room where pictures lined the walls. Her daughter spoke first, calm, clear, unshaken. She explained that from this moment on, her mother would be treated with the same respect shown to his family, or there would be no marriage, no more hidden conditions, no more quiet insults. His parents exchanged shocked glances, unprepared for boundaries from someone they thought they controlled. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't threaten. She simply stated that love cannot breathe in a room where dignity is unwelcome. When they refused to reconsider, her daughter did the unthinkable. She paused the entire wedding. Venues were contacted, deposits frozen, contracts reviewed, friends gasped, his parents panicked. The carefully curated event they'd treated like a corporate launch suddenly crumbled. He begged for time, insisting things had been misinterpreted, but she held firm. She would not walk down an aisle built on humiliation. Watching quietly from the couch, she felt a mixture of sorrow and pride. Her daughter wasn't ruining her life, she was saving it. The panic soon turned into frantic damage control. His parents arrived with forced smiles and flowers, speaking in polished apologies that sounded more rehearsed than heartfelt. They insisted it had been a miscommunication, but never once admitted the cruelty of their request. What troubled her daughter most wasn't the insult, it was their refusal to see anything wrong with it. They were sorry the wedding was paused, not sorry for the disrespect. And that made the choice ahead much clearer. As contracts were reviewed, something else surfaced, financial strings woven deeply through the engagement. Sponsorships, business mergers, deals disguised as wedding gifts. It became impossible to ignore the truth. This marriage was meant to benefit his family most of all. Even her daughter's job had been secured through a back-channel agreement. Love had been packaged neatly around control. She felt sick, not from betrayal, but from how close she had come to building a life inside someone else's blueprint. He finally delivered his own ultimatum: marry under his parents' terms, or the relationship would end. He framed it as practicality, as tradition, as keeping peace. But peace that requires erasing your mother is not peace, it's obedience. Her daughter listened carefully, then asked only one question: would you defend me the way I defend her? His silence answered everything. Sometimes love doesn't break, it reveals. A final meeting confirmed what they already knew. He wanted a wife who fit into his parents' design, not a partner who thought and chose for herself. His mother even hinted that marriage requires sacrifice, glancing toward the woman on the couch as if she were the sacrifice. That was the last line. Her daughter stood, calm and steady, and said she would not sacrifice respect, hers or her mother's, for anyone's approval. The room went cold, but her heart felt lighter. She returned home afterward, sat beside her mother, and quietly announced she had ended the engagement. There were no dramatic tears, just relief wrapped in sadness. She chose dignity over diamonds, love over status, truth over pretense. Her mother held her, grateful and humbled by the strength she had raised. The wedding was gone, but something far more precious had taken its place. A daughter who refused to build a future on disrespect. News of the broken engagement didn't stay quiet for long. Friends whispered. Relatives asked careful questions. His parents rushed to shape the story, painting themselves as misunderstood and hurt. But the truth travels too, gently, slowly, yet steadily. People who knew her daughter saw the strength behind the decision and quietly admired it. She stayed out of the noise, refusing to let gossip define what had happened. Respect isn't a scandal, it's a boundary. And slowly, that truth began to surface through the chatter. In the aftermath, more details emerged. His parents privately admitted they had wanted a wife who would fit their world without complication, someone who would adjust, comply, and not bring her background to the table. They'd viewed marriage as an alliance, not a union. Hearing this confirmed everything. Her daughter realized she hadn't lost a future. She had narrowly escaped one that never would have allowed her mother, or her own voice, to belong. He tried one last time to win her back: flowers, long messages, promises to talk to his parents. But promises made under pressure rarely survive it. She asked him a simple question: would you have defended me if I hadn't defended myself? Again, silence answered. Love that needs permission to protect you isn't love you can build a life on. She wished him well and walked away with grace. In the weeks that followed, real support quietly surrounded them. Friends brought meals. Coworkers sent warm notes. Neighbors stopped by just to listen. Her daughter leaned into therapy, faith, journaling, anything that helped clear the fog. She stayed close, offering tea, late-night talks, and the kind of comfort only a mother can give. The house, once filled with worry, became a place of healing again. His parents attempted one final meeting, this time cloaked in politeness. They spoke of reputation, embarrassment, and lost opportunities. Not once did they mention love or accountability. Pride, she realized, was their compass, not respect. Her daughter thanked them for their time and declined any further discussion. Some doors don't close in anger. They close because they no longer lead anywhere worth going. Eventually, a quiet stillness settled in. No more arguments, no more ultimatums. Just the undeniable truth that the engagement had been built on uneven ground. Her daughter chose to remain single rather than compromise her values, a decision rooted not in bitterness but in clarity. She didn't hate them. She simply released them from her future. With the wedding permanently canceled, life slowly rearranged itself. Deposits were refunded. Plans dissolved. Dreams reshaped. But something beautiful replaced what was lost: a deeper bond between mother and daughter, forged in loyalty rather than convenience. The break had happened, but what rebuilt afterward was stronger, truer, and free from apology. And for the first time in weeks, their home felt peaceful again. Her world had just been shaken, but what grew from the pieces was something beautiful. Stay with me, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you can see how the rest unfolds. Healing didn't happen overnight. It came softly, in long conversations over tea, shared laughs that felt a little easier each day, and quiet evenings where silence finally felt peaceful instead of heavy. She reassured her daughter that ending the engagement wasn't a failure, it was an act of courage. They revisited old memories, not to grieve what almost happened, but to remember the strength that had always been there. Her daughter admitted how deeply she'd been pressured, how slowly she'd lost herself. Hearing that hurt, yet it also meant trust had returned. Together, they promised that no matter what the future held, respect would always live at the center of their home. And in that promise, healing finally had room to grow. She began building relationships differently now. No more pretending. No more forcing smiles when something felt wrong. Friends who valued her stayed. Those who only came for gossip faded naturally, and she let them go without bitterness. Her daughter learned to recognize what real partnership should look like: not control disguised as concern, but mutual care rooted in honesty. They talked openly about boundaries, family, and what love actually means. She reminded her daughter that healthy love doesn't shrink you, it steadies you. And as they spoke, it became clear the heartbreak hadn't broken her. It had simply taught her what she would never again accept. Honesty, with herself and others, became the foundation of every connection moving forward. With the wedding behind them, her daughter realized how deeply her life had been woven into someone else's plans. So she slowly untangled it. She found work that valued her for her own merit, not because of connections or expectations. She moved into a small but warm apartment near her mother, decorating it with soft colors and memories instead of pressure and performance. Independence didn't feel lonely. It felt steady, empowering. She made decisions on her terms without asking permission from people who had never truly seen her. Watching this transformation filled her mother with quiet pride. Independence, she realized, wasn't about standing alone. It was about standing firm, knowing you deserved to exist fully as yourself. Their days settled into a gentle rhythm. Morning walks, weekend markets, movie nights where they laughed until their sides hurt. Their home was no longer a place where decisions were feared. It was a refuge built on warmth. She learned to enjoy small joys again: the smell of bread baking, the softness of a new blanket, the sound of rain on the windows. Peace didn't require wealth or approval. It simply required a life free from control. And little by little, the weight she'd carried for months dissolved. In its place grew gratitude for resilience, for truth, and for the unbreakable bond that had protected them both. With time, her daughter redefined what love meant. It wasn't expensive rings or elaborate weddings. It was kind, safety, shared laughter, being able to disagree without fear. She realized that a man unwilling to defend her or respect her family had never truly loved her. He had loved the image of who she could become under his control. And that wasn't love at all. She promised herself that if love came again, it would arrive gently, not as a demand, but as a partnership. Watching this understanding bloom, her mother felt relief wash over her. Sometimes the greatest love story isn't the one that survives, it's the one you walk away from before it costs you your soul. Family dinners become lighter. Laughter replaced tension. Relatives who once questioned the decision now apologized quietly, admitting they admired the strength it took to walk away. She forgave, not because she forgot, but because carrying anger only anchors you to the past. Her daughter, too, softened, not toward those who disrespected her, but toward herself. She no longer blamed herself for missing red flags. Instead, she celebrated that she had recognized them in time. Their unity didn't come from perfection. It came from the unspoken promise that they would always stand beside each other, even when the world expected them to bow. One evening, they sat together watching the sunset spill gold across the sky. The future felt open, wide, bright, and unhurried. She realized that life had brought them through disappointment not to harden them, but to deepen their understanding of what truly matters: respect, kindness, loyalty, peace. Her daughter smiled, lighter than she had been in a long time, and thanked her for standing beside her, not with loud battles, but with steady love. And as the last light faded, she understood something powerful. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't a wedding that goes ahead, it's the one that doesn't. Because walking away from disrespect isn't the end of a love story, it's the beginning of a life lived with dignity.